Welcome to my presentation. Today I want to talk about maximizing language and intercultural learning in short-term study abroad. Unfortunately, I can't be there today, but I prepared this presentation beforehand and recorded it so you can still see it. And if you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email. My email address is on the screen and I would be very happy to hear from you. In my presentation, I will first talk a little bit about the rationale and background for the project. Then I will discuss the language development in short-term study abroad before talking about the development of global competence in short-term study abroad. And at the end, I will summarize the findings of my project and talk a little bit about what kind of projects and research I hope to do in the future. As you probably know, study abroad is becoming more and more popular. This little statistic shows that more and more students are studying abroad. In 2012-13, almost 300,000 students, US students, went abroad for academic credit. And in fact, in 2015-2016, you can see that the number has already increased. Within these study abroad programs, fewer students are going abroad for a long time, for a semester or even an academic year, and most of the students only choose, for a variety of reasons, really, to participate in short-term programs. You can see here that this is from 2016, and 62% of the students participated in short-term study programs of a summer program, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, or up to 8 weeks. So to sum up, the previous research on outcomes of study abroad have shown that longer study abroad programs have more positive effects on language skills and intercultural competence. There seems to be a general consensus that the longer students go abroad, the more they can develop in all areas, in the areas of language development, in the areas of intercultural competence, and other things. It has also been shown that proficiency levels of students impact their language gains in study abroad generally. Studies suggest that students who have a lower initial proficiency can improve more. There has also been some research on a threshold level that students may need to possess in order to benefit from study abroad. And also study abroad shows, research on study abroad shows that it does not in all cases lead to language gains. So the question that I ask myself is, what do we need to do? How do we need to structure our programs to enable students to truly benefit even from just a short period in the target culture? And how can we maximize students' learning in short-term study abroad programs? So now I will give you a little bit of background about the short-term study abroad program that we have at Yale and in which I conducted this research study. Our program is intended for second year German, and it covers the entire second year in 8 weeks. So it's an intensive summer program. The first 4 weeks take place in New Haven at the Yale campus. And then for the second set of 4 weeks, the students travel to Berlin. For the class, we use the textbook Stationen. The New Haven part, so the first 4 weeks, we have class 3 hours a day, 5 days a week from 9 to 12. There are no afternoon activities. Students live on campus or off campus, and some students do have jobs during this time because they don't have any obligation outside of the class, but most students remain on campus and are very involved with the classwork. Then after the first 4 weeks, students fly to Berlin on their own, and there they stay with host families. We also have class 3 hours a day from 10 to 1, 5 days a week. There are 2 weekend excursions so these are overnight trips to Hamburg, Leipzig, and Dresden. And there are afternoon activities, not every afternoon, but probably about three times a week, where we explore Berlin, visit museums, go to cultural shows, and so on. It's a very intensive program. So now I will talk a little bit about the projects that I included in this short-term study abroad program to maximize the learning outcomes, to help students to use the language more, to think more about cultural issues, and to hopefully enable them to develop their language skills and intercultural competence more. The first project that students had to do was an individual daily reflective blog. On this blog, students had to post five posts per week, and they had to alternate between a written and a spoken entry. They were given some guidelines. The written post had to be about at least 10 sentences. The spoken post had to be at least 10 sentences. We did tell them if it was too short, try to speak a little more and so on. So that means that for both of the 2 parts of the program, the 4 weeks in New Haven and the 4 weeks in Berlin, altogether students had to do 20 written and 20 spoken posts. The journal was kept on a individual blog, and students were encouraged to use Tumblr for this. And the reason is they were giving iPads for the duration of the summer, and Tumblr has a very easy to use iPad app. So we wanted students to be able to write these blog posts even on the go if they were in Berlin and exploring, so that it was very flexible when to complete them. So we recommended the Tumblr app, and I believe everybody also did use the Tumblr app. They were also encouraged to include images of the trip if they wanted, and some did and some didn't. And yeah. Here's just a screenshot of what one of those blogs could look like. You can see that students could personalize it if they wanted, and some personalized it more than others, and that's okay. And here's just another example of what such a blog would look like. So the individual daily reflective blog that they had to do for this blog, they were given topics, 1 topic per day, and this was intended to encourage them to think more about German culture and life in Germany. So for example, one of the topics could be, what have you learned about public transportation in Berlin? How do people get around? How reliable is it? How does it compare to public transportation in the US? And in addition to this topic, they also were supposed to reflect on one of these 3 prompts. So first, they could reflect on language use. What communication success or miscommunication did you have today? Or they could reflect on culture. What did you learn or notice about German culture today that you were not aware of before? Or they could reflect on intercultural encounters. Did you have any intercultural interaction today which was particularly successful or unsuccessful, and why do you think that was? And the second part, the reflection, was only completed while they were in Berlin, whereas the general 1 topic per day was completed throughout the entire 8-week program, the 4 weeks in New Haven and the 4 weeks in Berlin. For the second project, the students completed a photo task on a group blog. We had a class blog on Tumblr where everybody was invited so they could all contribute to it. And they were given a daily photo prompt. The photo prompt could be related to traffic in Berlin, to multiculturalism, to history, entertainment, culture, what is typically German, and so on. We did the photo blog throughout the summer, though, even in New Haven. We already started this photo task. So students would go out into the real world and take a photo, post it onto the class blog, and also write a little explanation of why they posted it or what the topic means to them, and so on. And then we took in class time to look at the photos that everybody posted and to discuss more about these cultural issues that we could see in the photos, and why students had selected these types of photos. And here is just an example of what it could look like. You can see here that students would post the photos and then a description of the photo or their thoughts on it. And this photo blog really was a great way to get students to really pay attention as they were exploring Berlin and to think more about a variety of issues. It was also great to have an opportunity in class to look at all the different photos that students had taken, and to allow them to discuss with each other and to get to know each other's viewpoints, and to really make this experience in Berlin not just one, my individual, this is what I see and I think, but to make it a group sharing experience where everybody was able to learn from each other. In addition to these, the blog tasks, the course included 2 cultural exploration projects. The first one, we called it Berlin Observation. It was an individual project for which students chose a setting in Berlin, such as a coffee shop, the supermarket, a marketplace, a playground, anything that interested them, the subway station, and so on. And after they chose the setting, they conducted 2 30-minute observations where they just went to this place and they just took notes of what they saw, how people are interacting, how they're communicating, how the place is set up. And they were given some observation guidelines for this. And then they go there again a second time and they follow up on what's different, what's the same, and what do they notice about this space. And then they prepare a presentation on this setting for in-class presenting, and they compare this setting that they had selected to the same setting in the US. So if they selected a coffee shop, they would say, okay, this is what I noticed about coffee shops in Germany, and this is what I know from the US. And they also were really encouraged to think about why things might be similar or different, to really think about how culture affects settings and how people communicate and interact. And at the end, students also wrote a 3-page observation report on what they found out. The second project is an Exploring Berlin project, and it's a group video project. So students work together with 2 or 3 other students and chose a topic that interested them, such as literary Berlin, dining in Berlin, green Berlin, history of Berlin, music in Berlin. The topics were varied a lot depending on the students' interests. And then students explored Berlin throughout the 4 weeks that we were there. They take pictures, they conducted interviews, they filmed little video clips with their iPads, and then put it all together into an iMovie about this topic, which they then at the end also presented in class. And here's just an example. One student selected a supermarket as her setting, and then presented on what she observed about the differences in supermarkets in Germany and the US. Okay, I will now talk about the research project that I conducted to assess whether these the projects to increase cultural reflection and language practice made a difference, whether students did learn from them. I gathered data for this for 3 summers, so that I had enough students to really see some results. And I first looked at the language development and study abroad, and there were 2 questions that I looked at. The first was, do students increase their language skills by participating in an intensive short-term study abroad program in the areas of writing, structures, listening, vocabulary, and reading? And then the second question is, do students reach similar language levels through a short-term study abroad program as students in the regular semester sequence? And the data collection for this is still ongoing, so that I can really compare if the 8-week summer intensive program, if the students reach the same levels, if they have the same learning outcomes as the students that do the year-long sequence at Yale. To analyze the language development, students completed a pre and post language assessment using DIALANG. DIALANG is a tool that's available free of charge on the internet. It can also be accessed on tablets, so that was great for us because students did have the iPads and could complete the assessment on their iPads. It assesses the skills on the Common European Framework of Reference in the areas of vocabulary, reading, writing, listening, and structures. It's available in a variety of languages, which you can see here. It does have sometimes a little bit of technical issues, but most of them we could solve very quickly. And since it's one of the only free tools that's available for assessing skills, we thought that this would be a good tool to use to externally assess what students' level was. Okay, so here are the results, the DIALANG, the language results for the writing skills. 43 students completed the writing section before and after the study abroad program. The first part was completed before the New Haven part started, so before the 8 weeks, and then the second part was the second time the test was completed after the Berlin part had ended. You can see the green columns are the before the summer and the light blue are after the summer, and you can see here that the students generally shifted their language levels, that more students place in higher levels after the summer than before the summer. The same is true for the reading skills. Again, we can see that many more students place at A1 and A2 before the summer, whereas after the summer, more and more students reach the B1 level. Some students even reach the B2 level in reading. We see similar results for the listening skills. Only 41 students here completed this before and after. We can see that most of the students were at A1 and A2 before the summer, but after the summer, some students even reached B2 levels or C1 levels, so we really see a strong development here. In the vocabulary, it looks similar. The students were already at higher levels to begin with. Nobody was at A1 anymore. Many students were at A2 and B1, but we still can see that there is a shift towards higher levels after the summer program. And for structures, which is grammar development, also 42 students completed this. And here we also very strongly see that students did develop throughout this 8-week summer program. Nobody was at an A1 level after the summer, and many students reached B1 level, and some even reached the B2 level. So here I summarized again the levels that students had achieved before the summer program and then after the summer program. And again, just to remind you that this was from data from 3 summers. We generally have between 16 and 18 students per summer. So we can see that even though the major level, the majority of students remained in the same level, we can still see a shift where more and more students reached higher levels after the summer. And the statistical analysis did show that for all of the language skills, the increases were statistically significant, which is a very encouraging result. It does mean that students do develop their language skills even in a short summer, in an intensive 8-week summer program, that they're able to make significant increases in all language areas. So to summarize, improvement took place in all language areas: vocabulary, structures, writing, reading, and listening. But we still have more to investigate and look at, because if we look at even though on average students improved, it could be seen that some students improved more than others. Some students even showed no improvement at all. Some students even decreased in their language skills in the assessment. And of course, the assessment is not 100% accurate, but still we have to, I still ask myself, what can I do? What else can the program do? How can it be adapted to ensure that all students improve their language skills and have the opportunity to improve their language skills in this summer program? And of course, I still need to complete the analysis on how this compares to regular semester classes. And lastly, how does this language development compare to previous research? If we look at the data from the Goethe Institute, they say that for the A1 level, 80 to 200 instructional hours are needed. For the A2 level, 200 to 350 instructional hours are needed. The study abroad had about 120 hours of instruction, and if we add to that 120 hours that students already completed in the first and second semester, we get to 240 instructional hours. So that shows that A2 is the appropriate level that students should be achieving. Next, I will talk about intercultural competence in study abroad. There are different definitions of global and intercultural competence. Since I use the GCAA tool, I also wanted to show you their definition. And they say global competence implies the ability to interact positively and effectively with anyone in the world. It includes having an open mind while actively seeking to understand cultural norms and expectations of others and leveraging this gained knowledge to interact, communicate, and work effectively in diverse environments. I also generally like Fantini's definition, which I posted below, and that's global competence is, or intercultural competence is a complex of abilities needed to perform effectively and appropriately when interacting with others who are linguistically and culturally different from oneself. For the development of global competence, students completed a pre- and post-summer assessment with the GCAA, which is the Global Competence Aptitude Assessment. This assessment is not language or culture specific, and it includes 8 dimensions of global competence that is split into internal readiness and external readiness. Internal readiness includes self-awareness, risk-taking, open-mindedness, attentiveness to diversity, and external readiness includes historical perspective, global awareness, intercultural capability, and collaboration across cultures. And since I know that I need to keep this presentation somewhat concise in time, I'll skip the definitions, but you can read up on what they exactly mean on their website. And this is the chart that they use to exemplify the internal readiness and external readiness components. So for the global competence development, it measures these things. It uses a questionnaire to measure the subcomponents of global competence, and it gives students a score out of 100. So we can see here that green is the pre-summer score that students achieved, and light blue is the post-summer score that students achieved. So for internal readiness, we can see an increase in all areas. So that means that students did achieve higher levels of global competence just by looking at the scores alone. The same is true for the external readiness, although we can see that for global awareness, there actually was a decrease. Students after the summer had a lower average score in global awareness. On all the other ones, we see very small increases. Statistically, only the internal readiness showed a statistically significant increase. The external readiness did not. Looking at the subcomponents of internal and external readiness, we saw a statistically significant increase for attentiveness to diversity and historical perspective. So what does it mean? We saw a statistically significant increase only in internal readiness overall. We saw no statistically significant gains in self-awareness, risk-taking, open-mindedness, global awareness, intercultural capability, and collaboration across cultures. And there were a couple of things that I asked myself and that I still want to investigate and explore further. One of them is, why are the gains in internal readiness greater than external readiness? And what can we do to help students increase in the external readiness components as well? And similar to the language development, I'd like to know why some students develop more strongly than others. So to summarize, the findings of this research project, for which I gathered data for 3 summers, there were statistically significant language gains after short-term study abroad in reading, listening, vocab, and structures, and writing as well. And the statistically significant increase in global competence were only existent in some parts of global competence, not in all of them. So some questions that we still should consider and things that I would like to explore in the future. Why were some dimensions of intercultural competence in language developed and others are not? What can we do to help students increase in all areas, or at least in the majority of areas? I also want to draw on the qualitative data, the blog entries and the projects to see what they say about students' development of language skills and intercultural competence. I also did not, in these 3 years, did not look at the development of student speaking skills, and this is something I'd also like to look at in the future. Further, I would like to look at the relationship between the development of language skills and intercultural competence. Is there a relationship? Can we help students increase more in intercultural competence if we also help them develop more their language and so on? And lastly, I'd like to look at individual factors that may impact students' learning in short-term study abroad and how we can help them enhance their learning outcomes. For example, what role does the homestay play? How important are the initial language skills? And does the cultural background of students play a role as well? And of course, there are many more questions to investigate, but this is a nice project to start, and it has promising results in that we can see that language can be developed in short-term study abroad, and intercultural competence can also be developed, even though we still need to think about what more we can do to make students develop more strongly. So I thank you very much for listening to my presentation. And if you have any questions, please feel free to send me an email. I'd be very happy to get in touch with you and exchange ideas. And I hope that you enjoy the rest of your conference.